Welcome to Escape Velocity, a podcast to unpack the 0 to 1 journey of founders who have built successful, scaled businesses today that we all admire. Going from formation stage to product market fit is often the most messy and least linear part of the startup journey. In this series, we dive into the early parts of the founder journey and understand the lessons of successful founders who have gone from an idea to finding product market fit and beyond. Our inaugural guest is Bipul Sinha. Bipul is the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Rubrik, a leading data security company last valued at over $4 billion. Let's get started. Bipul, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome. So jumping right into it, Bipul, you're a rare breed in Silicon Valley. You know, most founders sometimes become VCs, but you actually went the other direction. Tell us more about what was that spark that made you decide to leave the investing world and go down the startup journey, especially without the naivete of knowing how hard the journey actually is that some first-time founders have the benefit of.
I'm an engineer and I did operations, product building, engineering management, and a lot of time at Oracle. And so when I was a venture capitalist, I always thought that I'm sitting on the sideline and clapping, and all the entrepreneurs are running to build the future, to create institutions. And I'm kind of out of action. And I wanted to really go into it and apply all my thinking and experience, both as an engineer, engineering manager, as well as a venture capitalist to go build an enduring institution.
And you know, many investors are actually thesis driven, right? They think sometimes top down about the ideas that they want to invest in. Was that helpful for you as you went about thinking about the idea around Rubrik? Were you also top down or thesis driven, or were you a little bit more bottoms up?
I always think about business as a market and a unique point of view into the market. So, and I also like markets that are already being served by incumbents and markets that are in some ways left behind by cool kids. Because whenever lots of cool kids jump in, you have over investment and over technology, and it actually erodes the whole market. And what I saw was in the Rubrik's case, backup and recovery market had not been innovated on for almost like 15-20 years, and we saw an opportunity to bring an A plus team and A plus technology into this C minus market and really transform this market into this new era of what we call data security.
Mm. And when you were in those early stages of product iteration, was Rubrik the clear idea that you wanted to pursue, or were you actually thinking about other ideas? Is there another company that you might have started if it wasn't Rubrik?
I always went after the backup and recovery market. Obviously, we didn't know how the what is the final form factor of the product and how we are going to approach the market. But we our original idea was to transform backup and recovery, and we never deviated from it. The company never had a pivot out of backup and recovery because the I have a strong belief that if there is a market where there is a fixed buyer, fixed budget, fixed project, and it is not being served well by incumbents, there has to be an opportunity to enter this market and really transform the customer expectation, the level of technology, and ability to kind of drive a new vision, a new requirement, and serve the customer better.
And you know, Rubrik wasn't an incubation per se, but you were an investor at the time. You were thinking about the idea. You know, why do you think it's so hard oftentimes for venture firms or even incubators to get incubation right? Like, do you think there's a better model out there to be built around this?
First of all, venture capitalist has a different mindset than an entrepreneur. Venture capitalists look at 100 companies and they pick one. And so they think about business as portfolio, they think about business as what could go wrong. Whereas an entrepreneur has a portfolio of one. Entrepreneurs are all in and they think about what could go right. So if you think about VCs are in the state of intellect, and entrepreneurs are in a state of will. And that's the reason many a times when VCs start companies, they start to think too much of protecting the downside as opposed to going for the upside. And that has been the challenge. And obviously, I also had to change my mindset as we started Rubrik of instead of looking at the downside, look at the possibility. And even if there is a small angle, how do we drive the truck through it? So I would say building incubators or building venture studios run into that challenge because you overanalyze yourself out of business.
I love that framing of intellect versus will. When you were thinking about the problem space, and you mentioned some of this already, but tell us a little bit about how you thought about competition, because obviously, data and security broadly is a big problem space, and there are other folks who probably had a lot of noise in the ecosystem. How did you know, or how did you draw the through line into knowing that the competition wouldn't be as worrisome as you might think?
The thing about competition is competition exists because there is a money to be had. And you can't ignore competition, but you also can't like get blinded by it. The way to think about competition is that when you walk on the street, you find a pebble on the road. If you bring the pebble too close to your eyes, it makes your whole world go blind.
Mm.
But if you just ignore it, it can make you fall. So you have to have the right perspective about competition. But the core thing about starting any business is, do you have a one angle that is so compelling that all the rest of the capabilities that competition have, the customer will ignore or forgive you and buy you for that one angle. And then you got to build the rest of it, but market gives you permission and time and capital to be able to go build the rest of it. But do you have one angle that is so compelling that the customer wants to buy your product and forgive you for not having the rest of the features?
And so, take us then to team building a little bit. So, Rubrik had, four co-founders. How did you think about constructing the right early team? What were you looking for in those people? And was it clear from the get-go who was going to be sort of the leader CEO? Is that a hard call to make initially?
No, it was very clear that who wants to be this, who will be the CEO of the company, and how we'll organize our founding team in different capabilities. And I'm very happy to report that all of the four co-founders, we remain great friends, and we never had any dispute about who is doing what within the company. But in terms of like hiring the early team outside of the founders, our focus was we wanted to hire a very very smart people who had high ambitions and they were not from the space. Because what happens is that if you come from the space, then you get wrapped up into the limits of the space. And not knowing the space, you look at it in a new way. And as a new company, you have to look things in a new way to be able to be 2 miles ahead of the customers. You can't be 200 miles ahead of the customers because then they write you off. But you have to be 2 miles ahead of the of customers and positively surprise them with new thinking. So our idea was that if we have highly smart and highly ambitious people who can dare to be 2 miles ahead of the market, ahead of the customer, and ability to frame why that new thinking, new capability, new angle is important for the customer, for their for the good of their own business, was very important. So we always focused on hiring outsiders into the company.
Hmm. Fascinating. And, maybe building on that, like Rubrik, it seems like is already creating its own Rubrik Mafia in many ways with a lot of successful employees starting startups. It's fascinating to watch some of these mafias start to grow, PayPal Mafia, famously Square Mafia, et cetera. Not all successful companies obviously have this phenomenon. I think you're touching on some of this already, but what do you think it's about? What do you think it is about Rubrik's culture and some of those early hiring practices that has helped create this?
We didn't want to build a company that was designed for an exit. We said that Rubrik had no finish line, and we are going to build a multi decade company, a company that will last longer than my own professional career. And so we wanted to bring people into the company who are ready to build an enduring institution, who are ready to set the foundation of an enduring institution. And that foundation has to be built on a context of people and culture. And we actually wrote the cultural uh, principles of Rubrik of how we are going to cooperate with each other, work with each other to really build this institution. And that had, I believe, looking back, had very profound impact in terms of kinds of people we brought in, how they collaborated in the company, and they also had their mind opened up to possibilities. And when you have people's mind opened up to the possibilities, then they at some point they think of themselves not as a passenger on a journey, but how do they go create a new institution, a new order. And that's what leads people to come out of Rubrik and have the confidence and wherewithal to go start a new company.
No, very interesting. And do you think out of those company principles early on, there's one that, was the most important, you think, in some of the culture that was set over time, and maybe one that, you thought might have been important very early on, but actually over time ended up becoming less important?
So, the most important thing of the cultural principles that we created was transparency. And our goal was that how do we create trust in the company to ensure that everybody is aligned to the goal. And so, to really drive this idea of transparency and trust, we brought radical transparency in the company where everybody was invited to board meetings and everybody had exactly the same information. And that really created a company where everybody was aligned to the vision, the mission, and what is in front of us for good and bad, so that we all together row in the same direction and solve important problems. So that was very, very important. The one aspect of our cultural principle that it took some time to kind of drive into our everyday principles was culture of excellence. Because one thing that we founders were very focused on was that how do we always leave things in a better shape than we found it, irrespective of whether it was my own creation or somebody else's doing. And so excellence was like a good house seal of approval, was like a very important thing for us. But it took us some time to really drive it into the culture, because it turned out to be a lot more softer than what we anticipated.
Fascinating. And you touched on this in the transparency piece, and I think it's so interesting because I think Rubrik is the only company I've come across who's literally invited their employees to the board meeting. Tell us a little bit about the tension there, because obviously startups are a journey where some days are great and some days are tough. How do you create enough trust in your broader team, especially as it scales, to make sure that during those maybe tougher times, people still understand the context in terms of the broader journey and the vision of the company and where you're headed?
So one thing that we all thought about, and personally for me, what is important, that if I'm going to go join a startup, and by the way, Rubrik was my first startup that I started and first startup that I ever worked for. But if I were to go consider working at a startup when I was a young person or early in my career, I would not join a startup just because my founder is saying something is true,
Hmm.
because I'm putting my human capital into the business, my prime years into the business. So I need to truly understand where the company is, what is really going on. And my idea was that if we create a company where nobody is an outsider and everybody is an insider, and give full information to everybody and treat people like adults, why are we treating employees like they are little kids who can't understand what's going on, particularly when when you are a 50 people, 100 people, 200 people company? Because when you get to 1,000 people company, then the dynamics changes, because then cost of
Right.
of communication, etc., increases. But in the under 1,000 people in the company, you have to treat people as they are adults, because they are the building the institution that you are trying to create for a long run. So this idea of giving people the responsibility of information, breaking political barriers and removing information as the political control, really created a culture where everybody was asking, why are we not doing this? And
Hmm.
somebody would say, people said so. Then people will say, why did people say so? And so that really created a culture that became a little bit of a self-governing motion that aligned the team. And there were tough times. I mean, obviously, any company, if you want to build something for the long term with high ambition, goes through lots of ups and downs, and that's the nature of things. And people understand that.
Hmm.
If you treat everybody as an adult and all around the table and tell them both good and bad, they always figure a way out. And I have personal belief that you want all the brains in the game as opposed to just you and few people around you.
No, I love that. Maybe moving backwards a little bit. So if we think about, the early days of Rubrik, you've got the team, you've got the idea. Now in Rubrik's history, you actually skipped a traditional seed round and raised a Series A directly. Tell us about the design decision behind this. What companies do you think that works well for, and when should founders avoid this?
In some ways, it was a seed round, but it was a larger seed round. We called it Series A because back then the seed concept didn't exist, so to say. See, the thing is that I am a firm believer that force fitting a new idea into an existing paradigm always leads to disaster.
Mm.
And so this whole idea of lean startup versus big startup or fat startup, these are frameworks, but frameworks are not applicable to new ideas, because new ideas are new things that has to be discovered. So you have to solve the problem that is in front of you and capitalize things that are appropriate for the problem that you're trying to solve. We were trying to build a new platform, a new architecture that was for data security. And to build that new infrastructure, new platform, new architecture, it required significant investment. We had like, I don't know, 25 to 50 people working over 2 years to build the version one of the product. And it was not for faint of heart. So we had to really focus on enough capital to be able to create version one beta of the product with some customers on it saying that what you have built has value. And that was the basis for the next round of capital and so on and so forth. So we calculated how much we needed, and then we multiplied that by two, because we knew that as engineers and as founders, you are always optimistic. So you need to have two bites at the apple from your own perspective. From somebody outside, they will say that's the one bite at the apple. But from your own perspective, you need two bites at the apple to be able to successfully get to the milestone that allows you to go to the next level. I mean, fundamentally, building a business is essentially solving two problems, particularly in the venture space: how to reduce execution risk and how to reduce finance risk. And when you have to combine the two to get to the right milestone to be able to successfully demonstrate both execution and a reduction of financial risk, is what is needed for first round of financing.
Mm. Well, it's a great framing and a great framework for early stage founders to think through. You kind of started to mention this as you got into the market, or at least starting to think about early design partners or customers, especially in the security infrastructure space. It can be a pretty daunting task, right? You have customers are pretty wary of having a young startup touch their sensitive data or be a part of their stack. How did you tackle the problem of finding some of these early adopters, especially in the enterprise?
Again, the challenge for any startup is to figure whether the dog will eat the dog food, because dog doesn't tell you what the dog likes to eat, and you have to create food that dog will eat and eat a whole lot of. So the best solution to this problem is to get outside of your cocoon and go to where the truth is. And truth is with the customers, truth is in the market. So what we did was we hired inside sales rep, or now call it SDR, who would call customers from around the country and set up meetings for me. And I was the rep. And we actually did 60 such calls where we would present Rubrik as if this product ready to be sold, to get feedback and understand how are they perceiving what our proposition is. Do we have too much of a proposition or too little of the proposition, or is our message getting received in the right way? And then we also did an interesting innovation. We created a one page early access contract where we asked our customers to pay, or prospects to pay $3,000 to be able to test our beta product. And it was a controversial idea, because people said, if even if somebody takes your product for free to try it, you should give it to them because you want to get as much feedback as possible. But we wanted to eliminate tire kickers. We wanted to find believers, because if you are a young company, you have to go to believers, and believers find other believers, and that's how you grow, because you have whole world to sell to. Why try to convince somebody who is not convinced? And asking for $3,000 was a way to find believers, because if somebody can't get $3,000 to try your product, how will they pay you $100,000 3 months later?
Right. Right. Fascinating. And, I think building on that, Rubrik very famously had a very fast, hyper growth right out of the gate. Tell us a little bit about how do you think about structuring a company to be able to do that and achieve that, as well as how did you know that the market was actually ripe enough and the product would resonate, before investing too early into some of that growth there?
So it is all about like preloading a lot of market discovery. businesses have to think about what is the most important and most critical risk in the business. And a lot of times, founders, because of their own psychological safety, they don't confront that issue. They go to the company and build a lot of products because that's an easy thing to do. And when they drive back home, they think that they had a successful day. But just building product is not value creation in a startup. Value creation is whether you have a proposition that market would buy. And that's a very hard thing to do because you are hearing a lot of no's, no's, no's. And that is by design because everybody says yes, then there is no value proposition because it's a consensus idea. So you have to confront that problem that, hey, whether people will buy this thing or not. So you have to front load market discovery. So what we did was, while we were building the product, we were actually like pitching the product to our potential customers and getting their feedback. So by the time we hit the beta of Rubrik, we already had several customers lined up with signed contract to try our product. And before we hit GA, we sold over $300,000 already when the product went into GA. So we created signals early. And then I have this other belief that every business should have a risk capital. Even if the it's a risky business, you still needs to have a higher degree of risk capital and about 10% of your capital to experiment. So what we did was, even when we raised only $10 million in the beginning and we needed significant engineering investment, we invested in marketing and sales early on to be able to use this information that we had about the market and about the product value proposition to be able to accelerate. Because because to gain the momentum in the market, you need to have a very high impact with the market. And to be able to create high impact with the market, you need to first be certain that you have a proposition that people would buy, and then you have to put your life force into a seminal launch or whatever event that you want to do to create enough pipe, to create enough momentum to get off the air, to get off the ground
Hmm.
into the
And do
air.
you think there was a moment where there was a clear feeling of product market fit, or an aha moment, or an anecdote from a customer where you knew at that point that you had unlocked that opportunity?
You can never be 100% because that's the nature of the game, but you need to have enough conviction to be able to go strike that.
On that point, you've spoken a lot in the past about trusting your intuition, right? And how do you think about balancing that, with data and the team that might be in some cases telling you to go in a different direction, and then when you're wrong, does it make you double guess your intuition the next time, or how do you get over that hump?
First of all, when you think about the future, nobody knows the future. No experience can help you know the future. No knowledge can help you know the future. Even if somebody has done startup 5 times, they can't know the future. They may know best practices, but best practices you can read in the books, but they don't know whether the dog will eat the dog food, because that's something is in the future, and this is in the world of unknown. So when you are talking about future or thinking about future, your own intuition is as great as anybody else's input. So you have to take all the input, but not let those input override your own intuition. And you have to be truthful to your intuition, as in, like, make sure that you are not deluding yourself and not letting your enthusiasm take over rational thinking that you have. So it's a mix and balance that you have to create. But I'm a strong believer that if I am the person who is thinking about this business 168 hours a week and week over week, if somebody knows about this business better than I do, particularly about the future, I should leave and do something else.
So, maybe on that, switching gears just a little bit, obviously AI has been the theme of the year in the technology sector. Maybe tell us your thoughts about, do we think we're overhyping or underhyping the potential of AI? And more particularly, describe to us, where are we right now in the AI cycle in the security space?
AI will have a significant impact on the world of computing in variety of ways. But AI is not a distribution disruption just like internet. AI is a productivity disruption where in everything that you are doing, you can do better with AI. And I think the biggest thing about AI is that it's the change of how we interact with computer. So if you think about going 30 years ago, it was punch card. 40 years ago, it was punch card. So from punch card, we have evolved into mouse and click and workflows. Now you are interacting and programming computer with natural language. That has significant implication. That really means that within the next 5 to 10 years, all the UI as we know it is going to disappear, because all these UI are designed for a workflow, a point and click, and go through 5 screen to say yes to get an outcome. Now you can talk to computer, say, I want this outcome, and computer will behind the scene create the workflows to fulfill what you're trying to achieve. What it means is that this whole workflow and application will get reduced to a chatbot. So if you think about a world where your the whole UI world is going to be reduced to the chatbot, and chatbot can be created on demand by one click, because chatbot is irrespective of the application area. HR person needs the same look and feel chatbot than your salesperson. So what essentially means is that value creation will come to the people who own the data, and not even LLM, because LLM is going to be commodity. And since the data model and the data processing has been separated in the LLM, because LLM can interpret any textual data that is get feed to it,
Right.
irrespective of who generates it or what happens to it. It's a significant disruption to how we are going to consume uh, products and services going forward, how those products and services will be delivered, who will accrue value in the equation, and more importantly, the how it is going to be programmed, and how we make people more productive, because all of the edge of knowledge will be readily available to everybody in the world, whether a child growing up in Pakistan to somebody living in Silicon Valley. They will have all the world's information on their fingertips. So the question is, who can connect the dot from the edge of innovation forward to create a new world order? And that's where the challenge is, and that's where the opportunities are.
So if we think about AI within the broader security space, if we fast forward 5 years from now, generally speaking, do you think AI will be more of a friend or foe for security? And part of the thought there is that attacks on one hand could be more sophisticated and growing in scale and complexity that could be increasingly difficult to scale with, but also at the same time, tools and protection because of the opportunity within AI and to build it within the security platforms will be enhanced. Curious to get your take on what does the world look like in 5 years from now?
Obviously, any new technology, as much as it is going to be used by defender, you have a very motivated adversary who will use the same technology to attack you. And also, the challenge with the cybersecurity is that attackers have to be right one time, and defenders have to be right 100% of the time. And when you have this kind of an asymmetric warfare, it becomes very difficult to prevent everything. So the question is that we have framed the cybersecurity wrong, because the success in cybersecurity is seen as CISOs who are able to stop attacks. And no CISOs will be able to ever going to stop 100% of the attacks, because of the nature of the asymmetric game that we are in. So the cybersecurity has to be reframed as a resilience, which means that attacks are inevitable. You should try to stop as many attacks as possible, so that you have a very few successful attack, but successful attacks are inevitable. So the CISOs have to think about, how do we continue to operate the business even in presence of cyber attacks and breaches, and that's where the game is going to move to. And that's where the AI applicability is, because if you think about the volume, variability, and velocity of cyber attacks, it has gone beyond human comprehension. Nobody knows what the heck is going on, because
Right.
of the size and scale of the infrastructure, compute, data. And to be able to connect the right dots and able to formulate the strategy of recovery and resilience is where the huge applicability of AI is in front of us. Obviously, Rubrik is pioneering that market, the cyber resilience market. We actually created this market, and we are continuing to think about, how do we help our businesses, our organizations that we serve, to be better cyber resilience. How do we ensure that CISOs reframe the cyber discussion from stopping to defending, and defending means fast recovery. That's where the future of cybersecurity is, and there is a lot of AI to be done there.
Amazing. And, maybe for the last few questions, would love to drop it to a personal level. You've now worn many hats, from executive to investor to founder, and even as CEO, many hats as the company has scaled. When you started into each of these new roles or phases within these new roles, how did you think about how to adapt and fill the holes you may have had in those specific roles? What can founders take away from some of your experiences?
I have a strong belief that you have to have a mindset of mindless pursuit of excellence. Our society talks about mindfulness, but that's all bogus, because mindfulness means that you are carrying the burden of the past and experience and conditioning that you have seen in other places. But every situation, when you are creating something new, is different. So, how do you ensure that you forget what you know and learn and iterate very, very quickly? And your ability to not bias yourself from the past, look at things from first principles, and ability to devise strategies on the fly to be able to react to the evolving situation is what leads to success. And that's what I have done. I mean, I've found a lot of success. I've found also concomitant failures, but as long as you are doing 50 more than 50% the right decision, you will survive to live other good days, and ensure that you don't repeat the same mistakes that you have made in the journey, and things will evolve. So my advice is to not listen to any advices, listen to fewer podcasts, and focus on what is in front of you and maximize the input.
Except for the right ones. And so, maybe last question: what really drives you fundamentally as an entrepreneur? What has kept you going and driven you to keep pushing over this arc of your career?
I think about how to realize my own potential, and there is no finish line in a potential. There is no somebody gives you a award that, hey, you won or you are done. So how do you constantly push yourself and have an unlimited ambition and maximize what is in front of you to continue to evolve and create and learn, and until a point where you feel like you're done, and get out of the train and build a train that keeps going.
Amazing. Well, Bipul, this has been an honor and a privilege. This has been dripping with knowledge, and I know a lot of our listeners are going to enjoy this. So thank you for taking the time. Been amazing to watch the journey of Rubrik over the many years, and wishing you guys many more success in this new journey ahead.
Thank you, Ansaf. Really appreciate the opportunity.